You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Brian Kelly sat down and did a one-on-one with Garland Gillen of Fox 8 down in New Orleans. I believe this happened during one of the Tiger Tour stops. It appeared that way, and they had about an 8-minute conversation. You can go watch that interview in its entirety there at the Fox 8 website. Garland did a really good job with it. And some of the conversations that they had and talking points that they had were pretty obvious. But the thing that stood out, I'll get to a lot of it, but the thing that stood out most to me was when Garland asked Brian Kelly about Kayshon Boutte. Because we all remember this now, when Brian Kelly had his pre-spring press conference, he was pretty adamant talking about guys that struggled in the transition, and he pointed out Kayshon Boutte very clearly and specifically pointed out Boutte as someone who kind of needed to fall in line. Well, this, in a sense, the way Garland asked him the question was kind of, how special can Kayshon Boutte be in this offense? But that's not exactly the direction that Brian Kelly took the answer when given the open door to talk about his star receiver.
Look, I think everybody knows I shot one across his bow, if you will, because I think he needed to be more engaged. And you know what? He got it. And I'm excited about what he can do. He's in the training room every day. He's engaged. During spring, he was out there helping the younger players. He's moving around. I think he's poised based upon his ability to now really understand how important it is to be part of this, that he can have a breakout season. I'm excited to see him get on the field.
Remember, we haven't even seen Kayshon Boutte yet in a full 12-game season. He broke out late in the COVID year after we saw, obviously, Jamar Chase had opted out, and then Terrace Marshall opted out, and then Eric Gilbert opted out. And then late in that season, it was really like the final couple of games where in 2020, boom, where Boutte popped and went off. And then we saw him for half of last year, and then he broke his foot. So we haven't even seen full tilt, full season Kayshon Boutte. So when Brian Kelly says Kayshon Boutte can have a breakout year, that may sound a little bit like lip service, like we already know what that guy is. And we do as a prospect. As a projectable prospect, we know what the NFL thinks about Kayshon Boutte. He's going to be one of the first receivers taken in next year's draft. But we would certainly like to see him maximize his time and his opportunity at LSU. Now, a big part of that will obviously be who is throwing him the football in this offense. They came out of spring without having named a starting quarterback. And the way that was kind of asked was about potentially in not naming a starter. Does that basically help you keep all of these guys engaged? Because had you named a starter, obviously someone might transfer out. Here was what Brian Kelly had to say.
Well, certainly that's unintended consequences of that. I don't think we went in there with that game plan that let's get this thing muddied so nobody can transfer. Here's what happened. We needed to put a new offense in, and that offense really needed to take precedent over fitting it towards any one particular quarterback. And the reality is each one has a different skill set. So what will happen now is that when we go into camp, the real work begins because we're going to have to fit the offense to each one of their skill sets. So the separation will take place in preseason camp.
So separation in preseason camp. The one question, and listen, we've talked about this enough. I understand that, and certainly you could argue that's an unintended consequence that no one will transfer. The separation happening in preseason camp is obvious, but the question is when in preseason camp. I'll keep referring to 2018 because it's the thing that we have as an example. It's the thing that we kind of know, right? 2018, Joe Burrow showed up here in June, went through summer workouts. They get into August. It's an open competition. 2 weeks into camp is when you saw McMillan and Narcisse leave. That was in August. So I'll remind you, Jaden Daniels already transferred, so he ain't going nowhere. If he leaves, he's got to go down to the JUCO level or FCS if he wants to play this year, which he could. He could. He could go down. He could leave, go to and walk into any FCS program today and be the starting quarterback. He could. But more likely, Jaden Daniels is here. We all know Walker Howard is redshirting, likely to redshirt this year, so he's not a flight risk. The questions are the other two guys. The questions are, if you get 2 weeks into fall and Jaden Daniels has emerged, does Miles Brennan stay? I don't know. It would be the same thing for Brennan as I just said with Daniels. He could leave as a graduate and go anywhere, but wherever he went, he'd have to walk in and be the day one starter. Now, maybe there's a situation like that. I'll remind you, last year in South Carolina, they were starting a grad assistant who they gave him a helmet and said, hey, bud, now you're our starting quarterback. That happens. Those situations do happen, and there could be one somewhere, in the SEC or somewhere in college football where that opportunity would be there. But really, I think the guy that would be the one we'd all be concerned about leaving potentially would be Garrett Nussmeier. And if you're Brian Kelly, I think the sales pitch to Garrett Nussmeier is, hey, look, you got two veteran guys ahead of you this year. They're both gone next year. They're both going to be gone next year. So you have a clear path for it to be your team next year if you stay. And oh, by the way, each of the last 2 years, LSU's used 3 quarterbacks. Will he heed that? I don't know. But that's the one guy I would tell you that I'd be most concerned about it if he decided to jump at some point. And one more from Brian Kelly. Again, this was an interview Brian Kelly did with Garland Gill on a Fox 8 New Orleans. You go to the Fox 8 website and see the whole interview there. It runs about 8 minutes. But the one other thing that I thought was interesting was when Brian Kelly was asked, it was the last thing, he was, what would make this first season a success? Understanding that, like we all do, what he inherited. But his answer is very telling because it continues to reinforce the reason why Brian Kelly's here.
Playing the game the right way. 4 quarters of football. A team that is competing. Look, I am much more about process, and the outcomes have always taken care of themselves. If this team plays hard, plays smart, plays with the right traits, we're going to win a lot of football games. And I don't know that I've ever gone into a season saying, hey, I think we're going to lose 3 or 4. I want to win every game we play. And we're going to prepare to win every game. But we have some holes, and that we're going to have to address through recruiting. I think everybody knows we had about 36, 39 scholarship guys when we went to play in the bowl game. But I think this is a football team that's poised to surprise some people, and I'm looking forward to it.
A football team poised to surprise some people. Brian Kelly has continued to say over and over again the reason he's here is to win a national championship. And he expects to win every game. And that expectation is something that he needs to instill in all of his players. And once he has a roster 1 to 85 that can compete with the best teams in the country 1 to 85, and then they have that expectation of winning every game they play, that's when all of a sudden you've developed a program that has that expectation that you can win every game you play. That's not LSU today, but it will be sooner than later. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.